Her words shattered him, not because of the cruelty, but because of the finality. She stood over him, arms crossed, her voice echoing through the marble halls of the home he built with his own hands. "I can't stand you. I wish you'd vanish from my life." She didn't whisper it, she declared it. To their daughter, to the servants, to the world. To her, he was no longer a husband, only a cripple in a chair. But what she didn't know, what no one in that house could have imagined, was that those words would ignite the most ruthless, calculated, and devastating response a betrayed man had ever delivered. What he did after that night made her regret those words forever. The dining room that evening should have been filled with nothing more than the gentle clink of cutlery and the aroma of roasted chicken, but her voice had poisoned everything. She lingered by the table with her glass of wine, lips twisted into the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Across from her, in the deep stillness of his wheelchair, he sat unmoving. His fork hovered midair, a piece of chicken suspended, his expression unreadable. Their daughter, small and fragile between them, froze. Her fork slipped from her hand and struck the porcelain plate with a sharp clatter. She looked from her mother's icy glare to her father's strange, unbroken calm, sensing that something dangerous had just begun. He set the fork down, slowly, deliberately. Not a flicker of rage crossed his face. He took the napkin from his lap, dabbed his mouth with it, and then folded it neatly beside his plate. Only then did he turn to his daughter and lower his voice, soft enough to almost be tender. "It's okay. Eat your food." But she could not, because the silence around him was no longer silence. It was a presence, heavy, waiting. Without another word, he pushed back from the table, the wheelchair gliding across the polished marble floor with a low hum. The sound of it filled the void left by his silence. He didn't look at his wife, didn't answer her mockery. He simply wheeled himself toward the corridor, toward the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway, the one she had never once been allowed to open. She smirked, mistaking his retreat for surrender. "Finally," she whispered into her glass, "maybe now he'll understand he's nothing." But inside that locked study, the sound of a key turning in a drawer whispered of truths she didn't know existed. Folders marked confidential, sealed envelopes waiting for the right moment. Plans that had been patiently sleeping in the shadows, all stirred awake that night. And though she believed her words had broken him, what they had truly done was far more dangerous. They had given him permission to begin. The wheels of his chair hummed softly as he rolled down the corridor, past portraits that told a story his wife no longer respected. There he was, years younger, in crisp suits, a man who once commanded respect on construction sites, climbing steel beams with a smile. Next to those photos, newer ones, after the accident, his wife at charity galas, radiant, while he sat in the background, his presence more like an accessory than a partner. She had let the frames hang as reminders of who he used to be and who she now believed he was, a relic. He stopped in front of the oak door. For a moment his hand hovered over the brass key, his reflection faint in the polished surface. Slowly, deliberately, he unlocked it and pushed the door open. The room was nothing like the rest of the house. No glittering chandeliers, no polished marble. Here the air smelled of ink, leather, and steel. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with files. A wide mahogany desk with locked drawers. On the wall, a framed blueprint of a building, not just any building, but a hospital wing, its title etched in bold, Cole Medical Research Center. He wheeled himself behind the desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. The sound of metal sliding free echoed through the quiet study. From inside, he pulled out a thick red file marked Confidential Holdings. His hands lingered on the cover. Inside were documents no one in the household, not even his wife, had ever seen. He opened the folder and scanned the papers with a calm that belied their power. Property deeds, offshore accounts, company shares hidden under layered trusts. Assets worth more than his wife had ever dreamed of mocking away. Assets she believed had dwindled after his accident. He paused at one page in particular, a recent transfer of stock, a signature at the bottom, his. The company belonged to his wife's lover, and now so did the majority of it. He smiled. It was not a smile of joy, but of inevitability, The desk drawer yielded more. A sealed envelope, thick and heavy, addressed simply, "To be delivered by Richard, only if she crosses the line." Richard, his oldest friend, his lawyer, the man she despised because she couldn't bend him to her will. He tapped the envelope once, slid it back inside, and locked the drawer again. From the corner of the study came a faint noise. He turned slightly, and there she was, his daughter, small fingers gripping the edge of the doorway, wide eyes fixed on him. She had followed him, curiosity outweighing fear. "Daddy," she whispered, "why do you keep that door locked?" He wheeled closer, lowering his voice to the same calm tone he'd used at dinner. "Because some doors," he said gently, "must only be opened when people push us too far." Her brow furrowed, but she nodded. She didn't understand. Not yet. He closed the door softly after her and turned back to the desk. His wife thought his silence was surrender. She would soon learn it was the sound of war. The house was quiet that night, but not with peace. In the master bedroom, her laughter broke the silence, a laughter sharp enough to cut glass. She had drawn the curtains, locked the door, and sprawled across the silk sheets in her robe, phone pressed to her ear. "He didn't even fight back," she whispered, her voice dripping with disdain. "He just sat there like a pathetic little doll in that chair. Do you know what he said? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Can you imagine? I told him I wished he'd vanish, and the fool rolled himself into that cave of his like some wounded animal." She paused to take a sip of wine, swirling the glass as if savoring her victory. "He's useless. Just a chair with a wallet. Nothing more." The voice on the other end chuckled, a man's voice, smooth, confident, laced with greed. "Good. That means he's soft. Once you get him to sign over those properties, we'll have everything. That waterfront estate, the 2 plots in Victoria Island, we'll flip them in months." She grinned. "Leave that to me. He still thinks I'm loyal in some pathetic way. It won't be hard to convince him. He's been hiding behind that lawyer friend of his. But I'll find a way." The man on the phone grew serious. "Just remember what I told you, Anna. He can't suspect. If he does, he'll tighten everything. And I can't afford delays. I've got investors waiting." Her eyes narrowed, her lips curling in annoyance. "Don't worry. I've been playing this game for years. He trusts me enough to let me stay in this house, doesn't he? He believes I'm the dutiful wife while he sulks in that chair. He doesn't know I've already moved on." At that moment, a creak echoed faintly from the hallway. She froze, listening. Her eyes darted to the door. Silence. She sighed and relaxed, resuming her mocking tone. "You should have seen his face tonight," she went on. "Blank, like the world had ended for him. I swear, sometimes I wonder why I even married him. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe I thought pity would turn into love. But look at me now, trapped with a cripple. It's pathetic. Once he signs those papers, I'll finally be free." On the other end, the lover's laughter returned, darker this time. "Good girl. Remember, once he's out of the way, it's just you and me." She ended the call and tossed the phone aside, stretching lazily on the bed. Her eyes drifted to the door, and for a fleeting moment, unease stirred in her chest. Had she imagined that creak? She dismissed it with a shake of her head and drained her glass. But what she didn't know was that a small red light blinked faintly from inside the oak-paneled corridor, a hidden camera lens no one had noticed. And downstairs in his study, the crippled husband leaned back in his chair, the footage playing silently on his screen. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He only watched. And when her words, "I'm trapped with a cripple," echoed through the speaker, a muscle in his jaw tightened. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the blueprint of her downfall. The clock in the study struck midnight, each chime echoing through the darkened house like a warning. He sat alone, the glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. His eyes were fixed on the screen, replaying her phone call, every cruel word cutting deeper. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed what he already knew. She wasn't just unfaithful, she was plotting, and she had made her first real mistake, speaking it out loud. A knock came at the side door, quiet, deliberate. Not the main entrance, never that. Only one man knew this entrance, a friend from before the accident, the only one who hadn't abandoned him when the world turned its back. He wheeled across the study and opened the narrow door. Richard stepped in, tall and sharp in his charcoal suit despite the late hour. His presence carried the same steady authority it had when they'd sat side by side in lecture halls decades ago. His hair was streaked with silver now, but his eyes were clear, alert, and loyal. "You called," Richard said simply. He nodded and rolled back to the desk. With a hand that no longer shook, he reached for the drawer, unlocked it, and pulled out the thick envelope sealed in wax. He placed it on the table between them. Richard glanced at it, then at his friend. "So it begins?" "Yes," the husband answered quietly. "She's crossed the line." Richard's jaw tightened. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need to. They had prepared for this moment long ago, in whispers and signatures, in trust agreements buried beneath layers of corporate law. But still, he waited. The husband leaned back in his chair, the shadows making his calm expression almost unreadable. "Tonight she told me to vanish, wished me gone. Then she called him, the real estate parasite. She thinks I'm finished. She thinks I'm weak." He tapped the envelope once with his finger. "I want you to make sure she learns otherwise." Richard's eyes flickered with something like satisfaction. "When?" "Not yet," he replied. "Timing is everything. I want her to believe she's winning. I want her to smile in his arms, thinking the world belongs to her. Only then will she see what it feels like to lose everything." Richard nodded slowly, a man accustomed to patience. He reached for the envelope, then hesitated. "Are you ready for what comes after? Once this is in motion, there's no turning back." The crippled husband's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Richard, I was ready the day I fell from that scaffolding. That day they buried me alive in pity. Tonight she gave me permission to rise." The lawyer's hand closed firmly over the envelope, the seal unbroken. He slipped it into his case. "Then we wait," Richard said. "And when the moment comes, she'll never see it coming." As the side door closed behind him, the husband turned back to his monitor, her words still playing in the glow of the screen. "I can't stand you. I wish you vanish." He muted the sound, leaned back and whispered to himself, almost as if to her, "Be careful what you wish for." The mansion pulsed with music that evening, chandeliers spilling light across crystal glasses and glittering gowns. Guests filled the hall, businessmen, wives dripping in diamonds, old friends and rivals, each drawn by her invitation, each expecting the usual display of wealth. She floated through the crowd in a scarlet dress, radiant and laughing, a perfect hostess. Beside her, the crippled husband sat in his wheelchair, his presence more spectacle than participant. She kept him close, not out of affection, but for show. The pity he evoked added to her narrative of sacrifice. The long-suffering wife, still tethered to a broken man. And tonight, she intended to make sure every guest saw the burden she claimed to bear. "Darling," she said loudly, her hand resting mockingly on his shoulder, "would you like another glass of wine? Or should I ask for a straw so you don't spill it?" Laughter rippled through her circle of friends. She tilted her head, pretending to translate his silence to the crowd. "Oh, he says yes, please. Isn't that adorable?" He didn't move. His eyes flicked briefly toward her, then away as though she were nothing more than background noise. But the stillness in his gaze unsettled even the guests who laughed politely. Later, when the music softened and the crowd gathered around for a toast, she rose to her full height, glass in hand. "I want to raise a toast," she declared, her voice bright, commanding attention, "to resilience and patience. My dear husband may no longer be able to stand tall, but he still sits here with me. And for that, I suppose I should be grateful." The words dripped with venom disguised as humor. Gasps mingled with awkward chuckles. Some guests glanced away, uncomfortable, while others, hungry for scandal, leaned in closer. He sat in silence, glass untouched, his hands steady on the armrests of his chair. Not a muscle in his face betrayed anger. Only his daughter, tucked quietly in the corner, noticed the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes locked on his wife for one long, heavy second before he looked away again. She clinked her glass against his untouched one and smiled broadly to the crowd. "To patience, to endurance, to carrying burdens we never asked for." Laughter broke out again, hollow but sufficient for her ego. He didn't drink. Instead, he wheeled himself away slowly, weaving through the guests until he disappeared into the shadow of the hallway. A murmur followed him, some pitying, others scandalized. She let him go, pleased with the attention his absence had stirred. What she didn't notice was the way certain guests exchanged glances, the way whispers began to circulate, not about her strength, but about her cruelty. For while she thought she had humiliated him, what she had truly done was expose herself. And upstairs, in the quiet sanctuary of his study, he sat before the monitor again, reviewing not just the footage of her call, but the new recording from the party, captured discreetly by the cameras he had installed long before tonight. She thought her stage was the ballroom. His was the world. The house had long since emptied of guests, their laughter fading into the night like smoke. Empty glasses littered the tables, and servants shuffled about collecting the remnants of her grand performance. She had gone upstairs with another glass of wine in hand, humming to herself, drunk on the attention she thought she had commanded. But down the hallway, a much smaller figure crept on silent feet. The daughter had slipped from her room, clutching a stuffed rabbit by the ear. She had seen her father wheel away during the party, vanishing into the shadows, and curiosity gnawed at her. Why did he always go behind that locked door? Why did he never let anyone inside? Not even her. Tonight the study door wasn't locked. He had forgotten, distracted by the recordings still glowing on his monitor. The faint crack of light beneath the door called to her, irresistible. She pushed gently, and the door creaked open. Inside, the study was a world apart from the glittering halls of her mother's kingdom. Heavy shelves groaned with files. Neat stacks of documents lay across the desk, and a single lamp bathed the room in warm, golden light. At the far end of the desk, papers were spread open, blueprints with bold black lines forming shapes she didn't understand. She tiptoed closer, setting her rabbit down carefully so its button eyes could watch. She climbed onto the leather chair opposite his desk and traced the lines on the blueprint with her small fingers. At the top, in crisp letters, it read, Cole Medical Research Center, Children's Wing. Her brows knit together. She whispered the words aloud as though speaking them might explain them. Children's Wing. A voice broke the silence. You shouldn't be in here. She spun around wide-eyed. Her father sat in the doorway, one hand still on the wheel of his chair. His face wasn't angry. It was calm, serious, tinged with something that almost looked like sorrow. I'm sorry, Daddy, she stammered. I just wanted to know, what is this? She pointed at the blueprint. Are you building a castle? He wheeled closer, the chair gliding softly across the carpet. He rested his hand on the edge of the desk, looking at the lines she had traced. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes softened. It's not a castle, he said quietly. It's a place where children who can't walk, like me, will learn to walk again. Her mouth fell open. You mean kids in wheelchairs? Yes, he replied. Kids just like me. Her gaze darted between him and the blueprint, awe dawning across her face. That's amazing, Daddy. Why don't you tell Mommy? She would be proud. The faintest smile ghosted across his lips, but his eyes remained hard. No, she wouldn't understand. Not now. The little girl frowned, sensing the weight in his voice but unable to name it. She nodded slowly, then hopped off the chair and hugged him tightly. I understand. He closed his eyes, holding her for a moment, letting the innocence of her embrace remind him of what still mattered. But as she left the room, skipping with her stuffed rabbit, his gaze returned to the blueprint. He whispered to himself, voice low, steady, certain. She will never see this coming. The city skyline glittered outside the penthouse window, neon lights painting the glass in streaks of red and blue. She sat curled on the leather sofa, phone pressed to her ear, her voice hushed but sharp. The silk robe hung loosely from her shoulders, her glass of champagne balanced dangerously close to the edge of the table. You need to move faster, the man's voice growled from the other end. It was late, but urgency made his words quick and sharp. Investors are breathing down my neck. I can't keep stalling them forever. If we don't get his signature on those transfers soon, the opportunity's gone. She pinched the bridge of her nose, irritation simmering. Do you think it's that easy? He may be crippled, but he's not a fool. He keeps everything under lock and key, and that damn lawyer of his hovers like a hawk. I can't just walk into his study and pull out deeds. Then find a way, the lover snapped. Get him emotional. Make him feel guilty. You've been married how many years? Use that. He probably still pities you. Twist the knife until he signs. Play the faithful wife. Make him think you're helping him simplify things. Then we'll move it all before he realizes. She swirled the champagne, her reflection warping in the bubbles. And what if he doesn't sign? There was a pause, then his voice dropped lower, colder. Then we make sure he has no choice. Her eyes flickered with something dark, not fear, but calculation. She had thought the same herself. Her husband's silence was unnerving. The way he looked at her without reaction, the way he retreated to that study, it gnawed at her. But she had convinced herself he was powerless. What could a man in a chair really do? Still, a seed of unease rooted in her chest. He's been distant lately. Quiet. Too quiet. That's good, the lover said quickly. Means he's weak. He's giving up. She forced a laugh, the sound brittle. You didn't see his face at the party. He looked like a ghost. I humiliated him in front of everyone, and he didn't even blink. It was like he was somewhere else. Good, the lover repeated, firmer this time. He's broken. That's when people are easiest to control. Keep pushing. Remind him of what he can't do. The sooner he feels useless, the sooner he'll hand everything over. She leaned back against the sofa, staring at the chandelier above. Fine, I'll do it. Tomorrow I'll talk to him. I'll make it sound like I care, like I want to help him manage the properties. He won't suspect a thing. The lover's voice softened, a whisper now. That's my girl. Once it's done, you'll be free of him, and we'll have everything. She ended the call and sat in silence, staring into the golden fizz of her glass. For the first time, the thought flickered through her mind. What if he already knew? She shook it off quickly, taking a long sip. Upstairs, the red light of a hidden camera blinked once in the darkness. And in his study, he watched the call play out live, his hand resting calmly on the sealed envelope on his desk. The trap was already closing. The next morning, the house was tense, heavy with unspoken words. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, but it couldn't brighten the atmosphere at the breakfast table. He sat at the head, coffee untouched, papers neatly stacked beside his plate. She strolled in late, draped in a silk robe, her movements languid as though she owned not just the house but the man in it. She poured herself juice, deliberately ignoring him until she was seated. Then with a falsely sweet tone she began. You know, darling, I've been thinking. She leaned forward, her chin resting on her hand. Managing all these properties must be such a strain for you. The travel, the meetings, the endless signatures. It can't be easy, trapped in that chair. He didn't answer. He stirred his coffee once, slowly, his eyes on the swirling liquid. I could help you, she pressed, her voice tightening under the sugar. If you signed over a few of them to me, I could take care of the details, free you of all that pressure. You'd finally be able to rest, to live quietly without stress. Still silence. Her patience snapped. She slammed her glass down, juice splattering across the white tablecloth. Don't you get it? You're dead weight. You can't even climb the stairs of your own house without help. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of dragging you around like some broken doll. I can't stand you. Her voice rose, sharp enough to pierce the walls. The servants in the hallway froze. Their daughter, halfway down the staircase, clutched the railing, eyes wide with dread. The wife's chest heaved as the words came out before she could stop them. I wish you'd vanish. Do you hear me? Just vanish from my life. For a heartbeat, silence reclaimed the room. Even the air seemed to wait. Then for the first time he moved. He placed the spoon gently on the saucer, lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes met hers, calm but cold, carrying the weight of something she had never seen before. Be careful what you wish for, he said quietly. Her breath caught. There was no anger in his tone, no pleading, no sadness, just certainty. Certainty that made the hair on her arms rise. She tried to laugh it off, waving a hand. Empty threats. You can't even leave this house without me knowing. But his gaze didn't waver. He rose slightly in his chair, his hands steady on the armrests, as if every word she had hurled at him had already been measured and filed away. Their daughter gripped the railing tighter, her small voice trembling as she whispered into the silence. "Daddy?" He turned his head, gave her the faintest nod of reassurance, then wheeled away from the table without another word. The echo of his chair, wheels across the marble floor, was louder than her scream of frustration, and for the first time, a flicker of fear pierced her arrogance, because in that quiet, chilling tone, she had heard not defeat, but a promise. The following morning dawned unnaturally still. No sound of wheels humming across marble, no soft voice greeting the staff, no familiar rustle from the study. The house felt hollow, as though something vital had been ripped from its walls overnight. She awoke late, hungover from rage more than wine. The bed beside her was untouched, cold. At first she didn't care. Perhaps he had sulked in his study all night, as usual. Good, she thought bitterly. Let him drown in his papers in silence. But when she descended the staircase, a strange sight froze her mid-step. In the center of the grand foyer, beneath the glinting chandelier, his wheelchair stood empty, perfectly still. No cushion, no blanket, just the chair itself, abandoned as though its occupant had risen and walked away in the middle of the night. The servants murmured nervously, whispering to one another. One of them swore she had heard the side door open around midnight. Another insisted she saw no one leave. Their whispers only fueled the tension hanging in the air. She walked toward the chair, her heels clicking against the marble, each step echoing louder than the last. Her hand brushed against the cold metal armrest. Her heart skipped. "Where is he?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The butler lowered his eyes. "Madam, we don't know. The study is locked, and he hasn't been seen since last night." She scoffed, but her pulse quickened. "Ridiculous. He can't just disappear." Yet even as she said it, the memory of his words from the breakfast table struck her like a whip. "Be careful what you wish for." Her lips pressed into a hard line. She marched to the study, key in hand, and flung the door open. The desk was immaculate, files stacked neatly, lamp switched off. No sign of disturbance. But on the desk, placed deliberately in the center, lay a single envelope. Her name written across the front in his hand. She snatched it up, tore it open, and unfolded the letter inside. "Anna," it read, "you said you wished I would vanish. Consider your wish granted. Do not look for me. Do not call Richard. Do not pretend to care. From this moment, you and I are nothing. Live with your words. They are all you have left." Her hand trembled, the paper crumpling between her fingers. She read it again, and again, as though repetition might change the meaning. But the message was clear. He was gone, and he had left on his own terms. For the first time, panic slipped through her mask of arrogance. Where could he have gone? How could a cripple simply vanish, leaving behind the very chair that bound him? Had someone helped him? The servants watched her carefully, their eyes filled not with sympathy, but with something colder. Curiosity, judgment, suspicion. She forced herself upright, her voice steady, though her chest tightened. "He'll be back. He has nowhere to go." But even she didn't believe it, because as she looked at the empty wheelchair, gleaming under the morning sun, she felt the weight of her words pressing down on her. Her wish had come true, and it terrified her. The letter burned in her mind for the rest of the day. Every time she looked at the empty wheelchair in the foyer, her stomach twisted. She had ordered the servants to keep it there, untouched, as if staring at it long enough would force him to roll back into it. But the silence remained, and by evening, even she couldn't ignore the gnawing dread. The sound of the doorbell jolted her from her thoughts. She swept down the stairs, adjusting her robe with feigned composure. Standing at the threshold was Richard, his tall frame immaculate as always, briefcase in hand. Her lips curled into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" Richard's gaze was steady, unreadable. "I was instructed to deliver this if he ever left." He handed her a thick envelope, sealed in the same wax she had seen before in her husband's study. Her fingers hesitated on the seal. "Where is he?" "That," Richard replied calmly, is not my concern. My only duty is to follow his instructions. Her impatience snapped. You're hiding him, aren't you? You've always poisoned him against me, filled his head with lies. Tell me where he is. Richard's eyes didn't even flicker. I think you've told him enough yourself. He turned sharply and walked away, leaving her clutching the envelope like a lifeline. She slammed the door and ripped it open. Inside was not just a letter. There were documents, photocopies, papers bearing signatures and seals. The letter itself was short, almost cruel in its brevity. Anna, it read, this is the last gift I will ever give you, the truth. Nothing in this house, nor in your lover's hands, belongs to you. Every property, every account, every share is locked beyond your reach. The only thing you own is your reflection in the mirror. And I suspect even that disgusts you. Enjoy it, for soon you will understand what it means to lose. Her breath came fast, shallow. She skimmed through the papers, trust agreements, share transfers, accounts hidden behind walls of legal language she barely understood. Each line was another door closing in her face. She crushed the letter in her fist and hurled it across the room. Rage flooded her veins, burning hotter than fear. But when her phone buzzed, she grabbed it like a lifeline. His voice, her lover's voice, was a balm. Did you get it? He asked. Yes, she hissed. He's gone. Finally gone. Richard delivered some nonsense about trusts and shares, but it doesn't matter. He's not here to stop us anymore. Good, the lover purred. Then this is our chance. We'll move quickly. Once you're rid of the paperwork, the rest will fall into place. By the time he crawls back, if he ever does, he'll have nothing left. She laughed then, a hollow, bitter laugh. That's right, nothing. But even as she spoke, her eyes flickered to the discarded papers on the floor, because deep down, a voice she refused to acknowledge whispered the truth. He was gone, yes, but somehow he was still in control. 2 days later, she strode into her lover's sleek office tower, her heels striking the marble floor like gunshots. He rose to greet her with a grin, his suit immaculate, confidence oozing. For the first time in weeks, she felt alive again, powerful, untethered. The cripple was gone. Tonight, they would begin the life she had always dreamed of. Everything's ready, she asked, sliding into the leather chair across from his desk. He nodded eagerly, shoving a stack of papers toward her. All we need is your signature. Once this transfer goes through, those estates are ours. We'll liquidate within the month. By the time he resurfaces, if he ever does, we'll be untouchable. She uncapped the pen, her hand trembling with greedy anticipation, and scrawled her name across the pages. Line after line, she signed, imagining the wealth, the freedom, the final severing of chains. When she pushed the papers back across the desk, her lover grinned and snapped his fingers. Done. By tonight, you'll be the richest woman in this city. But when his secretary rushed in an hour later, her face pale, the triumph collapsed. Sir, she stammered, the bank, they've rejected the transfers. What? His voice cracked like a whip. They said the accounts are frozen, all of them. They require dual authorization from Mr. Cole himself. Her blood ran cold. That's impossible. He's gone. The secretary's eyes darted nervously. Apparently not on paper. He signed legal instructions with the bank 6 months ago. No transaction can move forward without his consent. Her lover snatched the documents from her, scanning them with shaking hands. Every page confirmed it. Safeguards, locks, stipulations written in ironclad legal language. She stared, her throat tight. No, he couldn't have planned this. Oh, he planned it, her lover snapped, slamming the file shut. Every word of this reeks of foresight. He knew you'd try this. He knew I'd be involved. He's not just gone, Anna. He's choking us from the shadows. Her voice rose, shrill with disbelief. Then break it. Find a loophole. There isn't one, he barked. The man buried us in contracts. Every asset is locked. Every company shielded. It's like he vanished and left his ghost in charge. Her chest heaved. She gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles whitened, her mind racing. She had wished him gone, and now somehow he had managed to disappear while still pulling every string. Her lover's eyes narrowed, suspicion dawning. You said he was weak. You said he was finished. But tell me, Anna, does this look like weakness to you?" She couldn't answer. The papers on the desk screamed louder than any words. He wasn't weak. He was in control. And somewhere out there, he was watching. She shoved the chair back violently and stormed toward the door, but not before catching her reflection in the glass wall of the office. For the first time, she saw it. Not the image of a woman freed from a crippled husband, but of a pawn dancing on invisible strings. And the one pulling them was no longer in sight. The news broke like wildfire, spreading across the city in whispers, headlines, and hurried conversations. An anonymous donor had funded the construction of a state-of-the-art medical research center. The grand opening was scheduled for that weekend, with dignitaries, press, and philanthropists in attendance. What caught her eye, however, wasn't the building itself. It was the photograph printed in the morning paper. She nearly dropped her coffee when she saw it. There, in crisp black and white, was his face. Not a grainy, outdated portrait, not an old file photo. Current, alive, standing. Her crippled husband, the man she had mocked and wished away, was captured mid-handshake with the city's governor, a cane in his hand instead of a wheelchair beneath him. The headline screamed, "Mysterious benefactor funds 50-mile-an-hour children's wing." Her heart slammed against her ribs. The mug shattered on the tile floor. "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "No, it's impossible." But the image was undeniable. He was alive. He was walking. And he had chosen to reveal himself not to her, not to their home, but to the world, on a stage she couldn't touch. That weekend, she found herself swept into the glittering lobby of the new hospital, dragged along by her lover who insisted on attending. "If he's back, we need answers," he hissed, gripping her arm too tightly. "We need to know how much he knows." The crowd was electric, cameras flashing as the ribbon-cutting ceremony began. A hush fell over the audience when the announcer's voice boomed, "Please welcome our benefactor, a man whose vision and generosity made this possible, Mr. David Cole." Gasps erupted as he stepped onto the stage. Dressed in a tailored suit, cane in hand, he carried himself with a steady grace that made the crowd rise to its feet. For months she had sneered at him as weak, broken, pathetic. But here he was, towering over the memory of that chair. His very presence silenced every whisper of pity. Her nails dug into her palm as the applause thundered. She wanted to scream to deny what her eyes saw. But the cameras were everywhere, catching her frozen expression, her lover's slack-jawed disbelief. David Cole raised his hand for quiet, his voice carrying easily across the hall. "When I fell, many believed I would never rise again. But what they didn't know was that the fall wasn't an end. It was preparation." He gestured toward the building behind him. "This center is not about me. It's about every child who has been told they'll never walk again. To them, I say, never let someone else's words define your future." Her knees nearly buckled. Words, the words she had thrown at him like daggers. "I can't stand you. I wish you vanish." He wasn't just alive. He was stronger, respected, admired. And every syllable of his speech was a blade sliding beneath her skin, exposing her cruelty for what it was. The crowd roared, the cameras flashed, and in the corner of the room, hidden behind designer sunglasses, Anna Cole trembled. Because for the first time, she realized what regret truly felt like. The hospital gala had barely ended when whispers began swirling in the business district. Investors murmured, journalists dug deeper. And by the time Monday arrived, the city buzzed with anticipation for the press conference called by her lover's real estate firm. Anna sat beside him in the glass-walled boardroom, her nerves raw. He had insisted she come. "We'll show strength," he told her, his jaw tight. "We'll prove to everyone that David's little stunt changes nothing." But she could see the sweat gathering at his temple, the way his hand gripped his pen like a weapon. The room filled with shareholders, reporters, cameras. The lover cleared his throat, launching into his prepared speech. "Our company remains strong, committed to growth, and..." The double doors at the back opened. The room fell into silence. David Cole entered, cane tapping against the polished floor, flanked by Richard and two suited men who moved like bodyguards. The crippled husband she had mocked, the ghost she had wished away, now stood in their midst with the unshakable presence of a man who owned the ground beneath their feet. Anna's breath caught. Her lover's voice faltered. What? What are you doing here? David didn't answer at first. He walked slowly to the front, letting the silence choke the room. Finally, he turned to the rows of shareholders, his voice calm but cutting. My apologies for arriving late. I was reviewing documents. Documents that confirm a truth some of you may not yet know. He set a folder on the table and slid it forward. As of 6 months ago, I acquired a controlling stake in this company. Gas rippled through the room. Shareholders snatched at the papers Richard distributed, scanning the signatures, the seals, the proof undeniable. Her lover went pale. That's impossible. You can't even... David cut him off, eyes cold. I can, and I did. While you were whispering in my wife's ear about stealing from me, I was quietly buying the ground out from under you. Every percentage point, every share, until the company you boast about is no longer yours. Anna's chest tightened. She looked at her lover, saw his composure crumbling, his empire slipping like sand through his fingers. David leaned forward, his words sharp enough to draw blood. You thought you could strip me of what was mine. You thought I was weak because I sat in a chair. But power does not come from legs or appearances or the arrogance of fools. Power comes from foresight, and foresight is something you never had. The room erupted. Cameras flashed wildly. Shareholders whispered with feverish energy. Some even applauded, eager to align themselves with the new authority in the room. Her lover sank into his chair, face ashen. Anna reached for his hand under the table, but he pulled away, his eyes filled not with love, but with fury. And in that moment, she realized she had lost both men, the one she betrayed and the one she betrayed him for. David turned once, his gaze flicking briefly to her. Just one look, no words, and yet it struck harder than any speech. It was the look of a man who had not only survived, but conquered. And she was already dust in his shadow. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and the soft hum of violins. It was the annual charity gala, a night where the city's elite flaunted wealth under the guise of philanthropy. Anna stepped out of the black limousine, her arm entwined with her lover's. She had dressed to kill, an emerald gown clinging to her figure, diamonds winking at her throat. She lifted her chin as photographers' flashes popped, determined to reclaim her place among the powerful. This is our stage, her lover whispered, his smile forced. They'll see we're untouchable. But inside, the air felt wrong. Heads turned as they entered, but not in admiration. Whispers rose, sharp and cutting, like knives slipped between ribs. Anna forced her smile wider, though her gut churned. Something was happening. Then the announcer's voice boomed through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome tonight's guest of honor, the man whose generosity has transformed lives across this city, Mr. David Cole. The words struck her like a blow. The room erupted in thunderous applause, and then he appeared. David entered with Richard at his side, dressed in a tailored black suit that gleamed under the lights, his cane striking the marble floor with a rhythm that silenced even the loudest whispers. Cameras flashed, people surged forward to shake his hand, and a path opened for him as if he were royalty returning to claim his throne. Anna froze. Her lover's grip on her arm went slack, his face draining of color. She tried to laugh it off, raising her voice just enough. Oh, look who decided to play philanthropist. How inspiring. But the words fell flat. No one was listening to her. The entire hall was focused on David, their crippled host turned icon of resilience. He didn't acknowledge her at first. He accepted greetings, shook hands, and let the room drink in his presence. Then slowly, his eyes found her across the hall. Their gazes locked, and in that single glance she felt stripped bare. It wasn't anger she saw in him. It was power. Unshakable, undeniable power. The announcer called for silence as David approached the stage. The spotlight followed him, illuminating the figure she had once belittled, transforming him into something untouchable. Tonight, he began, his voice steady, resonant, We celebrate not wealth, but the responsibility that comes with it. True strength is not measured by what we keep for ourselves, but by what we give to others. Applause rolled through the hall. Anna's throat tightened. Every syllable of his speech was a mirror, reflecting her cruelty, her greed. And then, as if fate wanted to drive the nail deeper, a camera crew panned the audience. The live feed splashed across the massive screen behind him. Her face filled the display, startled, rigid, pale. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. Some recognized her. Others whispered the rumors they had heard. The affair, the humiliation, the cruel words to a man now revered. Her lover shifted uncomfortably beside her, sweat glistening at his brow. She wanted to run, but the cameras pinned her in place like an insect under glass. And all the while, David stood at the podium, smiling faintly, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The silence of his gaze was enough. For the first time in her life, Anna Cole felt the weight of true humiliation, and it was only the beginning. The ballroom had fallen into a reverent hush. The chandeliers shimmered above, casting light over a sea of faces. Every eye locked on the man standing at the podium. David Cole gripped the edges lightly, his cane resting at his side. For years they had seen him wheeled into rooms as an afterthought, silent and diminished. Tonight he commanded the stage as if he had never been anything less than towering. He let the silence stretch, each second drawing the crowd deeper into his gravity. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, but carried to every corner. There was a time, he began, when I believed my life had ended. An accident left me broken, and I was told I'd never walk again. I was told to accept that my best years were behind me. He paused, scanning the room. But words are powerful. They can destroy, or they can ignite. A murmur ran through the audience. Anna's stomach twisted. She knew where this was going. David continued, his tone sharpening. Someone close to me once told me they wished I would vanish, that I was a burden, that I was nothing. He let the words hang in the air, and though he never looked directly at her, the audience's gaze shifted toward Anna. She shrank in her seat, the spotlight invisible yet scorching. But those words, David said, his voice rising now, did not end me. They awakened me. They forced me to rise, to fight, to prove that no man or woman is defined by pity, by weakness, or by betrayal. Tonight you stand in a hall built on generosity, funded not by wealth alone, but by resolve. Resolve born in the fire of cruelty. The applause swelled, thunderous, but he lifted his hand for silence. His eyes hardened. So to the one who wished me gone, I say this. Thank you. Your wish gave me strength. Your betrayal gave me vision. And your disdain built these walls around us. Without your cruelty, there would be no triumph. Without your scorn, there would be no legacy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The message was unmistakable. The tension shifted as whispers cascaded, names hissed into ears. Anna's name, Anna Cole, the cruel wife, the betrayer. Her lover stiffened beside her, shifting in his seat as though he might vanish himself. She reached for his hand, desperate, but he pulled away, eyes cold with blame. David stepped back from the podium, his cane tapping once against the stage floor. To those who struggle, to those told they cannot rise, let this building be your proof. Words can cut you down, but they can also carve the path to your ascent. And sometimes, he said, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly, the best revenge is simply standing when the world expects you to fall. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Guests rose to their feet in ovation. And in the middle of it all, Anna sat frozen, every spotlight now a weapon, every whisper a dagger. She had wished him gone, and now in front of the world, he had turned her wish into his victory, in her everlasting shame. The ovation still thundered through the hall when David stepped down from the stage. Guests surged forward to shake his hand, their voices overlapping in praise. He greeted them with quiet nods, his calm demeanor unshaken by the storm he had just unleashed. Cameras trailed him, capturing every step, every smile, every flicker of authority that now radiated from the man once dismissed as weak. Anna sat rigid, her chest tight, her palms damp. The applause battered her ears, but her mind spun with a single terrifying thought. He isn't finished. She was right. David moved through the crowd with deliberate steps, his cane clicking against the marble floor. When he stopped before her, the room seemed to hold its breath. She stared up at him, searching for some flicker of the man she once manipulated, the man who had once adored her, forgiven her, endured her cruelty. But his eyes held nothing of that man anymore. Richard stepped forward, opening his briefcase. From it, he drew a sleek, leather-bound folder. Without ceremony, he placed it on the table in front of Anna. The bold words on the front cut into her like blades. Divorce proceedings. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Her throat closed. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. You can't do this here. Not like this. David's gaze was steady, unflinching. Here is the only place, he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. For years, you made me a spectacle. You mocked me at tables, at parties, in whispers you thought I never heard. Tonight, I return the gift. But unlike you, I don't humiliate for cruelty's sake. I do it for truth. Her eyes darted around. The crowd was staring, drinking in every word. Her lover shifted beside her, his expression dark with anger. Not at David, but at her. The cameras zoomed in, catching the tremble in her hands as she opened the folder. Page after page bore legal seals, signatures, terms she couldn't escape. Custody papers, asset protection clauses, property locked beyond her reach. He had thought of everything. Her lips parted, trembling. David, please, don't do this. We can... He raised a hand, cutting her off. No, we can't. This is not punishment. This is justice. You wished me gone, Anna. Consider this your wish fulfilled. A stunned silence followed, broken only by the scratching of pens as reporters jotted notes, the flash of cameras immortalizing her disgrace. Her lover rose abruptly, shoving his chair back. I won't be dragged down with this, he muttered, storming toward the exit. She reached after him in panic, but he didn't look back. The crowd parted for David as he turned away, his cane striking the floor with measured strength. Applause began again. Not for her, not for them, but for him. Always for him now. Anna collapsed into her chair, clutching the papers to her chest as though they were knives embedded in her skin. Her humiliation was complete, and David hadn't even raised his voice. The gala's glitter had barely faded when the real storm struck. Courtroom doors swung open weeks later to a sea of flashing cameras, reporters jostling for position. Headlines screamed of betrayal, scandal, and fortune. But inside the polished wood walls, the battle wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about blood. Anna sat rigid at the defendant's table, her once perfect composure eroded by sleepless nights and whispered gossip. The diamonds on her neck felt like shackles. Across from her, David sat straight-backed, cane resting against the table. No wheelchair in sight. The sight alone unsettled her. He had shed the image of weakness completely. The judge called the session to order. Papers shuffled, lawyers murmured. Richard rose calmly, holding a thick file. Your Honor, he began, this case is not merely about divorce. It is about the welfare of a child. My client seeks full custody of his daughter, citing the mother's cruelty, infidelity, and neglect. We submit evidence, recordings, witness testimonies, financial documents that show not only moral unfitness, but active endangerment of the child's well-being. Anna's chest tightened as the recordings began to play. Her own voice filled the courtroom, cruel and cold. I can't stand you. I wish you'd vanish. Another recording played, her phone call with her lover, mocking David as a burden, dismissing her daughter as just baggage. Gasps filled the room. Even the judge's face hardened. Anna shot to her feet. Those were private. They were taken out of context. Sit down, Mrs. Cole, the judge snapped. She sank back into her chair, trembling. Then came the final blow. The daughter was called forward, small, nervous, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She climbed into the witness chair, her big eyes glancing from her mother to her father. Sweetheart, the judge said gently, who do you want to live with? The silence was suffocating. Anna leaned forward, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. Baby, it's Mommy, You'll come home with me, won't you? The girl's lip trembled. She looked at her father, sitting calm and steady, then at her mother's desperate face, and in that moment clarity struck her. She turned to the judge and whispered, I want to stay with Daddy. Anna's world shattered. No, she screamed, lurching forward. She doesn't mean that. She's just confused. But the girl clutched her rabbit tighter and shook her head. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered again, firmer this time. Daddy. The gavel struck like thunder. Full custody awarded to Mr. David Cole. Anna collapsed back into her chair, her cries echoing through the courtroom. Her lover had abandoned her. Her wealth was locked away, her reputation ruined, and now even her daughter was gone. David stood, walking with his cane, his daughter slipping her hand into his. The gallery erupted in murmurs, flashes from cameras exploding like fireworks. He turned once, his gaze falling on Anna, broken and sobbing. His voice was low, steady, final. Never curse the hands that carried you. One day they may carry your child away. And with that, he walked out of the courtroom, his daughter at his side. Anna was left alone, vanquished not by force, but by the weight of her own words, forever regretting the day she wished him gone.